That you will learn a lot of interesting things from him because he's very proactive in the field of blockchain, and he has very many interesting information to tell you. So, Richard, the floor is yours.
So, thank you very much for being here. I hope you're not too cold. And now, second thing which I would like to know, to what extent do you understand me? Who knows English well? Now, I don't know Russian. So, apologies. Another question is, who comes out of financial markets? Quite a lot. And now, a really hard question. Who will dare to ask questions? Only one person will ask questions. Please ask questions. So I have to say, it will only be interesting if you ask questions. Really, you have to promise. Please ask.
We'll try.
Okay. So, first I have to explain why I'm here and why I do what I'm doing. The reason why so just to give you a background, also to understand, I first studied law, and I studied law because I wanted to study economics, but people told me economics is nothing to study. I then, after doing economics, I went into a bank, and now also to explain how old I am, I started there in 1985, in 1983. And I was first working in the legal department, and then worked in the research department. And it was fascinating. The research department had an office which is maybe 8 times this table. And I was in charge there, and after having a doctorate, I was put in charge, and you'll laugh, to use a Commodore computer to write and program a graph of the foreign exchange price movements on a quarterly basis. This is why I was hired, and I was hired to actually use a data stream, which is an access to a data bank of financial data. So at the time, I was able to play around with market data and see how to analyze it. And for me, it was clear banking was an information business. And then I started the first startup, and the first startup was Olson Associates, and the idea was to build a real-time information system with real-time weather forecasts for financial markets, but using tick data and real-time buy and sell recommendations. Now, also, you'll laugh, I was completely inexperienced, so we hired the first software engineers, and at the time it was very hard, so we got people from Stanford coming, really good places, and they were all very nice guys, and I asked them, could you please tell me how long the project will take? So, very easy, 3 months, but just leave me alone to work for 3 months. And it took 3 years for us to understand that it was not a 3-month project. Now, also disappointment I have to explain. So we built a real-time forecasting service with graphical forecasts. Just imagine in 1985 you built this. And then we launched the service after kind of, 1.5 years or something. And then when it was released to banks, they had a problem after the first month. And guess what was the problem? The forecast always looked in one direction. The only way to change the forecast was to turn around the screen. But now, out of that, later on it became a success. We had 60 customers around Europe, big banks. But I also realized that I was in the wrong business. We did not offer financial products. Out of that, then, we launched, together with a friend, a company called Oanda, which is a market maker in foreign exchange. And what was very interesting, I learned, being a market maker, I learned what is a market really. Because if you today go and buy a book, and in this book you want to learn how does a market really operate, there is no good diagram which explains to you what's going on. It's very hard to get a nice diagram to explain to me what's happening. Money goes in, out, what does a market maker do? So it was lacking. And also, what you discover in doing this, which no one ever mentions, is, I mean, we have here electricity. And it's clear that when the owner of this place switches off electricity, you are not being charged for the electricity. So when you switch it on, you're being charged. When you switch it off, you not charged. Now in the banking system, what's very interesting, if you give me 100 ruble and I give it back to you in 3 hours, do I have to pay interest?
Yes.
No. In the banking system, you don't have to pay interest if you loan out money for an hour, 2 hours, 3 hours, 23 hours, as long as it is not over the night. So very important. The financial system doesn't operate like the electricity company, which charges by the second. In the financial system, you're not being charged or don't receive interest. Now, why is this such an important issue? Because it's clear, and living here in Russia today, you know interest rates are much higher. And why are the interest rates higher? Because it's said that the Russian ruble has a higher risk than, for example, the Swiss franc, which actually has negative interest rates. But now, again, in a financial system, basically we say that the free market is there to find the equilibrium price level, and that the price level should be fair. But now just imagine a system where if you sell ruble, you short ruble because you think ruble will go down. Why has ruble high rate of interest? To make selling expensive, to say, you know, please don't sell ruble. Actually, you offer high rate of interest that if I buy ruble, I should be earning for the time which I hold the risk of ruble, I should earn interest. But now, because the financial system is as it is, if you short ruble, you don't have to pay for going short. It's not like a loan which you take up to buy a house. You don't have to, intraday, you don't have to pay an interest. Now, again, I'm making the next jump. In the financial system, you have, for the most important currencies, we have a daily transaction volume of $2 trillion. That's just spot transactions, 2 trillion. To give you a perspective, this is the GDP of America is $14 trillion. So it takes 7 working days and you transact 1 GDP. So if you think about it, it's a lot of volume. But of these 2 trillion, 98% are positions which are opened within the day and closed. Only 2% are of people which keep the position open overnight. So, so the reason what I'm saying is that in this highly liquid market, interest rate payments don't happen intraday. So the financial system, which should work with interest rates, actually, if you think about it, doesn't work that way. So now, what do I want to say? I want to explain that the financial system, which is in operation today, is like an engine. I mean, here we're in an old car factory. Just imagine you build a car, but as opposed to an engine, you have horses which pull the car. I mean, it's clear that this car, is not a great car. So, in the financial system today, we build on an infrastructure which has developed around processes which made a lot of sense when everything was paper-based and hand-delivered. So originally, when you went to the bank, you would send a telex or call them up and say, please, I want to buy 100 ruble, and then you would send a letter to confirm, and the bank sends the letter back, and it was all at a pace of days. When it was batch-based, with paper, this made sense. But today, transactions happen over computers, millisecond trading, and the back office still is outdated. So, the reason this has to be changed. If this is not changed and updated to a very advanced technology, then the pricing mechanism of the financial system just doesn't work. It's like, an airplane only will fly as an airplane if the wings are constructed the right way, and it just cannot fly. And the same thing we're faced with the financial system, that it builds on old infrastructure. So now let me explain why I think what we're doing here is relevant. So the reason is that the blockchain technology gives an opportunity to all change this. So let's see. So what I wanted to try to explain, that today we have a completely outdated financial system. Because the financial is outdated and the pricing mechanism doesn't work, central banks around the globe have to support the economy. And they support it with quantitative easing to lower rates of interest and just keep everything afloat. Now, what I find very interesting, if I go and talk to some of the people whom I know well, some of them have access, are top traders or people in top banks, and you have a private conversation with them, literally private, in a room, and you listen to what they're saying, you would never believe that these are top bankers, etc. They are so worried about the system. And the reason why they're worried, because they have a lot of insight. So it's very overextended. Now, the reason what I'm trying to show is that the technology of the new thing gives us a solution.
Whoa.
So on the one hand, we have a global economic system, which, because it's outdated, is incredibly fragile. But here there is a new technology. It starts off with decentralized protocols, where at the core is the blockchain system. Now, I'm sure you have talked a lot about blockchains. I personally find that for me, if I have to explain it to a friend of mine, I look at blockchain as a notary service to keep track who owns what. In the case of Bitcoin, who owns which Bitcoin. So it's kind of not about miners, etc. This is all just details. Just from a high level thing, if I have to think about it, it's just like a global notary service, and the notary service does the following. It has these many different bitcoins, and with bitcoins there is an ID number and a private key. And only if you have the private key, it's up to you to sell or not. No one else can sell it. It's just you. Now, this is a great invention and incredibly cost efficient. Wouldn't it be nice if we can use that not just for Bitcoin, but actually for anything? And this is this interesting protocol which allows anyone to buy a Bitcoin, color it with the open asset protocol, and write onto it whatever he wants. And that can be, and I'll explain it to you more, by a bank to create its own colored coins. And then the global notary service can be used to update and record transactions of those color coins. But now, you know, when you have a great software service, and some of you are just doing software, how can you get people to use it? I mean, it's great to have good software, but it's even better if people can make immediate use. And the immediate use is to build one global stock exchange. So not just a stock exchange in Russia, not just a stock exchange in Switzerland, not just a stock exchange in New York or London, but just like the internet, have one global marketplace. Where now your color coin can be directly exchanged with your color coin, or your color coin with his color coin, so free exchange from one color coin to the next. And why is this so great? Why? Because today, when I want to buy, just as an example, IBM shares, I first have to, if I come from Switzerland, I have to convert Swiss francs into dollars, and from dollars I buy IBM shares. When I want to sell IBM shares, I go back to dollars and back to Swiss francs. But wouldn't it be nice that when I'm in Starbucks traveling, I walk into Starbucks, get my coffee, I want to pay with my IBM shares and not go back into Swiss francs, dollars, Swiss francs, Zurich, then convert my Swiss francs into dollars and walk back into it. Just direct. And now what's also very exciting is if you make it your startup, you say, I want to win the world. You create your company with your shares, and then you have your own shares as a color coin. And, you know, when you start up making a company, it's tough. It's tough to make a living. But then, maybe at the hackathon, you pay with your shares for the coffee. That would be great. In the background, there is a market makers which convert one color coin in the other. And now, because everything is fully digital, there is a nice thing, is, you know, you can sell color coins in very small increments. So you can literally cut up your shares in units of, you know, 50 ruble to pay for the water bottle. And actually, when you think about it, you have market makers, but to make a market in 50 ruble units for your startup, that's not such a big risk. I can do it. You know, maybe now I'm a little tough. Maybe, you know, after 2 days you start your next startup and I have lost the 50 rubles in your shares because, you don't update your thing and no one will take it. But maybe your company is a success. So the 50 ruble equivalent of your shares goes up in value. So why is it interesting? It creates liquidity for you as a startup. It creates liquidity for companies which have shares because you can start to pay. And I'm sure if you go to a big, you have the, kind of big retailers. The retailers have reward programs, which you have on your cards. And you can start to have your color coins and pay with coupons from your big retailer. Now, if you have time, read this article from the Bank of England. I think it's by far the best account of blockchain, its potential, and they clearly state that the blockchain is, next to double bookkeeping, the most important discovery in finance. What's also clear is when you read the report is that they don't really know what is the next big thing. I would argue the big thing is to build one global marketplace. So, again, how does it work to get color coins? So, whoever wants to issue a color coin, be it a bank, be it a retailer, or be it you for your shares, you buy a little bit of Bitcoin.
Where?
On any exchange which you find. On the internet, just Google, want to open a wallet, and then, like Zappo as an example, and then you have to transfer there.
Why do you need to buy Bitcoin? You can create your own digital currency as well. You don't need to buy it.
Yes, but now it's very important is we need Bitcoin just as paper. Bitcoin has the same role, literally, as in the banknote here. To show you a ruble note, which you see here. So, ruble are written on paper. So Bitcoin has just the same role as being paper.
Then it needs to be very cheap.
Yes, but now you know how you can make it cheap? You don't take one Bitcoin, but you take a Satoshi, which is 1/1,000,000th of a Bitcoin. So it is very cheap. And I'll explain to you afterwards what we do with Lykke, what we're building. So issuer buys a little bit of Bitcoin. Satoshi means you cut it out, you just take a small slice, and then you use the Open Asset Protocol to create some text. And now, in this example, I have the text of, let's assume it's a big bank which does it, and the big bank writes on this Satoshi that Deutsche Bank gives the holder of that dollars. And just use an example, Deutsche Bank says, anyone who has this color coin is entitled to $100. So when you go back to the Deutsche Bank with your color coin, that Deutsche Bank has to pay you to your bank account, which may be at the bank itself or at another place, has to pay out $100.
Okay, but why do we need dollars or Deutsche Marks or euros if we have such a universal thing as Bitcoin, for example, or color coins? Why do we need it?
It's very important. And I think this is, and I'm glad you're raising. He asks. Okay, he asks, why does one need, kind of all this complexity? Why not just one Bitcoin? This is how I understand your question.
No.
What do you want?
I want to say that if we have a universal currency like Bitcoin, why do they need other currencies if we can abandon them?
Yes.
Okay. We have a color coins, for example. We can exchange them.
Yes.
Do you understand me?
Yes. So, and this is a key issue. That is, in the Bitcoin community, a lot of people say there will be one currency in the globe.
Yeah.
Now, you have to understand what that really means. If you say there's one currency in the globe, then everything that you own, any liability, any contract you have made is in Bitcoin, and anything that you will receive is in Bitcoin. So everything is tied to the price of and value of Bitcoin. But now think, and I use the analogy of biology or the human body. So if you think about the human body, isn't it great that I can bend forwards like this? And like this? Very flexible. And that you are flexible as well. And you are flexible. But if we have just Bitcoin, I'm like this, and you're like this, so we're all like this. That doesn't work. It's just a complete failure. And I'm sorry to be so tough. And actually, when I myself, I always wanted to reform the banking system. And Bitcoin became, known, and people talked about it, and they always said there'll be one currency in the world. I say, but this doesn't make sense. And it took me until the end of 2011 to suddenly understand, this is a great mechanism, but I have to use this mechanism in a new context. Yes?
Why do we need banks?
I have not, now very important, you ask a very important question, why do we need banks? Banks today have different roles. Role number one is, a little inconvenient, is that my whole purse is at the bank. And I don't really like it, because if this bank disappears, my purse is away. So, and why are they today there with my purse? Because blockchain technology doesn't exist. It's all batch-based. If I want to make a payment somewhere, it's incredibly confusing. So I have to instruct them, and they have accounts somewhere. It's terrible, but this is why they want to have the thing. With blockchain, this role of intermediation disappears. But now, will there be zero bank-like entities? No. Because in the new world of this new technology, you still have people who are ready to aggregate, buy risk, and sell risk. That is really the know-how of market mechanics and know-how, now in this region life is tough. Okay, but maybe it has been too tough, so I'm ready to buy this risk and I'm selling. So this kind of risk intermediation. For that, there'll be a role for banks.
Maybe just exchange of risk. No?
Yes, but you'll always have holders of risk. Always. And, kind of like in buildings, these things are very important because otherwise it collapses. So in this respect, you have banks and organizations which maintain risk. And this is maintaining risk to make sure that the rain doesn't come in. Yes?
Banks usually don't take the risk. They spread risk between different peers, what they own. Banks usually just as a crown.
It is true. Today, banking, how it works is you say we do something very difficult, but in actually it's just about charging a lot for nothing. I mean, this is clear and making life very complicated. So it's clear that with this new technology, banking will become a very different animal. And it will be very tough for banks. But now what also has to be said is, like, if I come and issue Richard color coins. Now, people see me in a blue thing and say, Richard might be a nice guy, but can I trust him? So there'll be a big market for banks, which some of them still have trust, is to issue colored coins. Because they have more trust than an individual. And the issuance of color coin can be a very important business for them. So, yes, sir?
Richard, I think that your visualization of banking system is not right.
Yes.
No, your money.
Okay, you want the whole purse. Okay.
This is banking system.
Yes.
Because I give to bank, he give, you give, but Bitcoin is here. And if I not give to this system my energy, I not will give money from this system. This system under banking, and bank is supporting of finance system of old type, but
Yes.
new type
Yes,
is
yes.
Bitcoin
Yes,
under our
Yes. Now,
in cloud.
I know. Now, what you have to understand, in the end, I mean, this is the big debate. What I'm saying is, the banking system and any social system has trust. For example, you have a flat, you have know-how, you have built, kind of a nice restaurant where people regularly come. And this is real assets. And the color coin mechanism is just a representation of that asset. So any type of social interaction creates value. And now, we know that not any social system like love, don't make everything commercial. But many areas of our social activity, like employment contracts, etc., this a real commercial value. And that can be mirrored in color coins. So I'm not saying, it's what we're doing is we provide a representation of social interactions and the social value of that. Yes, but now what's very interesting is because you have different issuers of color coins, trust of the issuer becomes the big issue. And there is competition between who has more trust.
And also, like in the world that you're talking about, there will be big corporations, like for example in Russia, Gazprom, in the world of ExxonMobil or Starbucks. They will be using the Starbucks coins, ExxonMobil coins.
Yes.
What happened to the government currencies?
I can tell you what my aim is, the following. To the extent that government makes a service like provides health care, clean streets, we will still use the government currency. But now, to be a little tough, is we can decide, do we really want to use the government currency? So if for any reason we don't like it, because governments sometimes do policies which we don't like, we are free to choose.
Yes, but at least now the government has power over these big corporations to monitor and to regulate them. In that world, there will be no force or maybe like Microsoft, like super monopoly, for example.
Yes. Now, what you raise is a very important question. So actually, I would argue today the big guys have a disproportionate competitive edge. The example which I mentioned before, that you have your startup and come and pay with your color coin for your coffee, means that it will be a strong democratization for the smaller, medium, and up to second-tier organizations. So actually it creates a huge power to democratize society and make it more differentiated. Because also in Switzerland, we have a big issue. There are just a few big companies, and it would be great if the medium-sized companies had a bigger share.
Well, I mean, it would be great, but in that system, I mean, the government will have less control over big companies.
Now, it's
Because
again...
Gazprom, for example, issues Gazprom coins, and you can't really take any Gazprom coins out of Gazprom if you really want. Only Gazprom says, okay, I'll pay you Gazprom coins. Right?
Yes, but
and
now
say,
there's...
I don't want to pay you rubles.
But now what's very interesting, at the end of the day, people in government everywhere want people to have food and you know, kind of, it's all about the economy. Now, with this system, you create a lot of liquidity that people can go and buy. And if you can go and buy and get a restaurant to feed, you know, the economy works and everyone is happy. So today we face a situation where people don't understand the economic system. So they come with policies which are not well suited. Like, I mean, the real issue is that we face an economy is a dynamic system, like the human body. And for your human body to work, tell your heart to beat slower. I mean, typically we have a heartbeat of 60, you know, heart pumps or 70, you know, per minute. But for example, tell your heart to just beat 2 times per minute. I mean, you're immediately off to the hospital. So recommendations on an economic sphere are usually to slow things down. But actually, this is the wrong recipe. The recipe is to create an economic system where volumes are high and there is a lot of stability because it's well equilibrated.
Do you mean dynamic stability?
Dynamic stability, that's the key term. So key is to achieve dynamic stability. And the more convertibility of different assets happens, the more stable it is in the end.
Is it right to say that the new role of banks will be the assessment center, or like a termination point to connect virtual values into physical values and physical values into virtual values?
I mean, they're one of the players, but anyone participating in the marketplace will contribute to that decision process. So you'll have much more diversity. I mean, you'll have banks which play this role, you have investment funds which play this role, you have private individuals. It's a whole network. So I think key, and this is so very important, we don't carry out a message that, look, you're a stupid guys. No, that's not the issue. We have to create and provide them with the right tools, and then they'll just adopt. So what we envisage is the following. So use blockchain as a kind of notary service. You have your color coins, and then this is the project which we're launching, is we're building this global exchange which sits on top, where people then can interact and trade and use it for actual payments. So, key of it is to have immediate settlement. We have to get away from the system which builds on this paper-based process which of 2-day delivery as if it was physical. We need immediate. Then risks don't pile up. Then we can pay second interest. Now, if you have a color coin in your wallet. You have direct ownership to this color coin. If for any reason now, because you saw in the newspaper, oh, the CEO of this bank which issued this color coin, you know, he didn't make such a good impression, you can exchange this color coin for the color coin of another bank. And immediately you have changed your exposure to this other bank. And now, important, you don't have an intermediary which stands there. You own your asset directly. That's again a reduction of complexity. Now, anyone who, you know, kind of, I have to tell you, anyone who met me maybe for the last 18 years, one of the terrible things which I would do to him, I would talk to him why we need intraday interest rate payments. So, today, the yield curve, when you pay interest, starts from 1 day out to 10 years, for example in the US, up to 30 years. Central banks, when they try to influence the economic system, they have to move up interest rates, and they move up the daily interest rates up or down. But the problem is when a central bank during a crisis has to move up the daily interest rate, what happens to the companies which have, need credit for their regular business? I mean, their interest rates will go up. And because interest rates go up, corporations go bankrupt. Now, isn't it great if the yield curve goes down to 1 second, literally 1 second, like we pay for electricity? If there is, in this highly complex banking market system, need for short-term cash, we can increase the second interest rate, the 10-minute interest rate, the 1 hour interest rate, but the 1 day interest rate can still be low.
But it's the same thing in fixed income market right now.
But
The same thing right now works on fixed income market when you trade bonds. You've got interest rate and you've got price for the bond. And a lot of big banks, Deutsche Bank, Barclays, Central Bank, not Central Bank, but Sberbank, for example, trading these bonds. And every second, every minute, you've got stock exchange when you can sell and buy bond. And if something goes bad with interest rates, you can sell it just in 1 second.
yes,
And the price will be going higher or lower.
yes, but now, as it is, yes, the kind of the market value of bonds changes second by second. That's clear. But the interest rate of those bonds, because they have a minimal maturity of, they're not intraday bonds.
Yeah, it's not intraday.
You don't have a 10-minute bonds from Sberbank.
That's what they.
So the trick of the future is to have a 10-minute bond, 1 hour bond.
For what? But how can I use 1 minute bond like issue?
Now, for you, as if you're a private individual, not important at all. But if, for example, having lived through the Lehman crisis, just to give you an anecdote, so Adoanda, we had our bank, because Lehman had a good FX business, offered very attractive prices. We had $6 million with Lehman Brothers. And now I think, kind of like when you do business, let's, even if you have a tough job, don't walk away, let's continue to do business. So very important, I think. And we had the money there. But then the Lehman stock price suddenly started to collapse. And then eventually it said, we really don't want to lose $6 million. So we called up Lehman Brothers and said, we have $6 million with us, please send us the dollars. Now first, when they send, they have 2 days to wait. But then what happened is, in the evening, Lehman Brothers called back and said, by the way, I'm sorry, you don't have $6 million with us. It must be a booking error. we don't, maybe you actually owe us 500,000. So we told them, please check. And then on Sunday evening, they called back and said, oh, we have discovered 6 million are here, you'll get it on Monday. Now, the issue is they literally did not have the money in the bank account. So in that period, they would have been ready to not to have to make such an embarrassing call, having a senior person call us up, lie into our face and say, Richard, I think you don't have anything, even though he saw it on his screen that the money should owe us there. He would have been ready to pay a high rate of interest, to have money today to immediately pay out. So in the professional market, this plays a very important role.
Why no one introduced just 23-hour bonds so far?
If you go into a bank and ask them to make a small change like this, you understand why. It's just so costly, it's so painful, it's just unbelievable.
It's just a question of infrastructure.
Yes, just, but you mentioned just.
Yeah.
It's not just, it's a huge question.
I mean, can you set up like a service? Like
this is what we're planning to do.
Okay.
One question. We don't have 23 hour bonds, but we have 1 day bonds, so-called. What's the difference? If I can borrow money just for 1 day.
Because it's like in computers, we talk about the Hertz frequency. It's just a bad thing if the world global financial system has a Hertz frequency, of once a day, business days. That's just too granular. It's just like trying to build a computer. Just imagine you'd had a Hertz frequency